Hello, and welcome to the Mr. 50mm YouTube channel. I'm Mr. 50mm. For today's video, we're going to be having a look at the P45 digital back from Phase One, right here. Unfortunately, we're not going to be looking at the Plus version, as I only have the regular one. And I also realized that this sensor is only 1mm larger than the Aptus 22 that I reviewed previously. It's also not a fat pixel sensor. Where the Aptus 22 was 9 by 9 microns, the P45 is a minuscule 6.8 by 6.8 microns, meaning that I can only fit about 3.3 Sony a7R5 pixels per P45 pixel. So, with that said, in this video, we're going to have a look at the P45 and why I love this thing about as much as I love the Aptus 22 digital back, and why I think it's an awesome option if you're looking for a big CCD to try for yourself. And as another bonus, the P45, it is more common a digital back than the Aptus 22, which, by the way, if you haven't seen that review, I'm going to link to it in the description below. Before we get started, yes, I do know that this sensor is not a full-frame medium format CCD. That title belongs to backs like the Phase One P45 Plus or the Phase One IQ 160, 180, and the other series that use the IQ full-frame CCDs. But these sensors are incredibly expensive, so I don't have one. But hey, if you want me to get one, maybe like and subscribe, keep watching these videos, support me, I don't know, do a super thanks maybe, and we'll see if I one day have enough cash money to buy one. With that, let's get into it. What is the Phase One P45? Well, it's a medium format digital back featuring a 39 megapixel CCD sensor, as you can see here, and it's made by our best buddies at Kodak. The sensor itself is the KAF 39000, and the size of this sensor is 49 by 37 millimeters, which is a smidge more surface area than two full-frame sensors. As a result, the full-frame crop factor of this camera, or this digital back, is 0.67. And as I mentioned, these pixels, they're not fat pixels, but they're still pretty big, coming in at 6.8 by 6.8 microns. The P45 also has an ISO range of 50 to 400, which is not to be confused with the P45 Plus, which can go all the way up to a staggering ISO 800. Now, for a digital back that has a CCD, it also has one other pretty unique feature. Then that is, it can handle some long exposures. I couldn't find a specific value for the P45, but I've done around 20-minute exposures with this camera setup, and they looked pretty awesome. Now, the P45 Plus is stated to be able to do up to an hour of long exposure, which is like the only other medium format CCD that can do that, aside from the IQ 260 and IQ 360 that have CCDs. The CMOS ones, they can do that no problem, but the CCD ones, they're a very limited number that will do the long exposure. That being said, back to the back that I currently have, it is one that is equipped with the Mamiya 645 mount. As you can see, it's mounted onto a Phase One 645 DF Plus. However, there are other mounts available: Hasselblad V, Hasselblad H, Contax AFD, many variants. The P45, it does 16-bit recording per channel as well in its RAWs, and it can shoot at a staggering 0.6 frames per second until your card fills. The memory card, by the way, the camera uses CF cards. I'm using a CF card adapter, as you can see. And this is pretty normal for a digital back of 2005. Now, on the back of the P45, we have a display. And just 4 buttons. The display is 2.2 inches. It's LCD, and it comes in at 116K dots. So, not that many dots. Now, the camera itself is powered by a BP 911 battery, and with the battery, it weighs in at 670 grams, or roughly 0.67 plena. Neat. Almost the same as that crop factor. Now, when it comes to price, you'll want to have a seat, and you're going to want to remove your socks, lest they be blown off. In 2005, the P45, this thing here, came in at a staggering $29,999 USD, or about $48,300 USD in today bucks. No joke there. It's just a real big number. Now, it's actually a little bit more than a 2024 Civic Type R. In Canuck bucks, it makes me feel very poor. It's roughly $65,200. Ugh. Let's move on. Caveats of ownership. It's actually not too bad with the P45. The main one, like other medium format CCD sensors, is that the sensor is huge, and so it is exposed when you pop the back off. Now, it's not entirely uncommon to find one with minor dings on it, and as a perfectionist, or if you are one of those, it might drive you a bit mad, but 99.9% of the time, they don't really affect your image. So if it's a really good deal, I'd still say go for it. Now, in the Aptus video, I was also made aware in the comment section that it's apparently not recommended to use blowers on the sensor glass. Just an FYI. I do, and I haven't noticed any damage on any of mine. So, keep that in mind. How do you use this thing? Well, I know you're probably expecting that this is going to be broadly the same as the Aptus 22 review, and it mostly is. You can very much mount this on whatever you want if you have an adapter and a PC trigger for whatever you're connecting to, and the 8-pin Phase One port connector here. And you can still buy them. They're quite expensive, about $100 per cable. But if you do that, you can turn the P45 digital back into a technical camera or whatever other camera system you can adapt it to. In my case, I'm just primarily using it with the 645 DF Plus that you see here, but I could potentially mount it on my Mamiya Super 23 press camera, and again, whatever you like, as long as you have the appropriate adapter to mount the digital back to whatever you're putting the back onto. So that being said, I personally like using this on the 645 DF Plus, and I don't normally move it around to my other cameras, not just because I don't have the cable, but there's another reason as well. Image review. The P45 screen is somehow really, really bad. It is much worse than the Aptus 22 screen. The P45, I'm aware, does have a better screen, but at least on my P45 non-plus, it's not very good for much. It's not that good when it comes to focus checking at 39 megapixels. When you punch in to this 116K dot display, it doesn't render the image very well, even at maximum zoom, and that's pretty annoying because I do find it kind of tough sometimes to actually check focus. Now, that being said, I know that if you just trust your gear and take your shot, it's probably best just, assume that you didn't get it and maybe just take a couple more, or trust that you did and move on. But I do find it pretty annoying that the back of the screen on what was a $30,000 digital back can't properly do an image preview. So as a result, I stick on the camera that has autofocus and, live my life as I do. Now, again, this back, it is a fairly nice system overall, and the modularity is one of the pluses of these things. But if you are looking to do that and put it on a more manual camera, I would actually strongly recommend that you avoid the P45 and either go for something like the Aptus 22, which actually has a screen you could check focus on, or if you have many dollars, splash the money on an IQ series digital back. There are other ones as well. The Aptus line is fairly big. There's the Aptus 1, Aptus 2, the Mia DM line. You can also look at Credo digital backs. There's plenty that have better screens than the P45, so just keep that in mind. Now, another thing I also want to bring up with using these digital backs is that, the modularity is quite nice, but it does come at the cost of weather sealing. Luckily, the P45 actually is quite nice in that there's no fans or like fins for any cooling or anything. But from what I can tell, the buttons and stuff, they're not really weather sealed, they're not really rated for it, and there's no documentation saying that it is. So, don't use it in big rain. Shooting with the Phase One P45 operation. Now, in this part of the video, I will be using the P45 again with the 645 DF Plus. In this configuration, it basically operates like any other DSLR, except that this camera has only one AF point. Now, the P45 itself, as a digital back, it is very responsive. Power up time is actually fairly brisk. Not instant on, but pretty good. I'm going to press it and you'll hopefully see when it's ready. Now. Oh. Beep. And now we're ready to shoot. Pretty quick. How long was that? Maybe a second? We'll see in the video when I do the editing. Now, it's not just the power on that it's quick as well. Interfacing with the digital back is pretty snappy. Going through menus, and doing your image review is actually not the worst in the world. But let's have a look. Here's the image review. I will move on to the magnification. Oh, sorry, magnification, and there you go. It renders reasonably quick, lots faster than the Aptus 22. And the other thing that's kind of nice about the digital back, the P45 that is that this 4-button UI is extremely simple. Basically, you can see on the screen basically what functions are in each corner, press them to engage, and there will be little function indicators on the screen as you do things in your menu to tell you what you can and can't do. Overall, I find this system very intuitive, if not a bit tedious. Now, it's actually overall, again, reasonably quick, but yeah, the most tedious thing is if you are going to do your image review, where now you can see I'm in the review mode. You can only go up or down or left and right using these 3 buttons, and depending on what mode you're in, this will either scroll you down or up, and then this one will change whether or not you do left or right. So yeah, a tiny bit tedious, but super simple, easy to understand, quite nice overall. Again, I have to emphasize the screen is the worst part of using the camera. As I said, image review is really bad, but at least while you're zooming in, it's responsive. Just that really limited resolution and the preview rendering that it does means that even at max magnification, it isn't that clear whether or not you can, verify your focus or even check that your colors are correct. And again, real shame given that the digital back costs more than a fairly reasonable automobile. Now, at the time when this camera came up, I really got to go back to this because at the time when this camera did come up, APS-C cameras, full frame cameras, already had fairly nice 230 K-dot displays, and the image review didn't suck. And and this is on like $1,000 camera. So why not on a $30,000 camera? I don't know. Weird choices of phase, I suppose. The one nice thing I can say about this display is that it is reasonably visible in daylight. So, you won't have any issues changing ISO or checking histograms. That being said, if you use this camera on one of the SLR bodies that is supported, I think overall it's still a super nice experience. You can keep shooting away. The camera will be responsive. It won't be slowed down by any buffer or anything. The only thing that I will again mention is that all of these SLR bodies that are supported focus like their cameras from 1990s era 35mm SLRs. All of them have just a single AF point, but aside from that, I don't think that shooting these is all that different from shooting, say, a Nikon D600. Just a tad slower. Doesn't slow you down as much as the Aptus 22 would. Now, when you're using this digital back, you are limited in ISO range from 50 to 400, as I mentioned earlier. But really, you probably want to keep this particular back at like 50 to 200-ish. 400 is workable, but it's pretty noisy. And if you had to push, it is, you need to clean it up. It's not like using a modern GFX 50 or 100 camera, which kind of has, seemingly invariable ISO performance, like good from 50 to 12,000 or whatnot. And you know what? It's actually not too bad. It's one of the things about this camera that I actually kind of like, just because it gives you a bit of constraint as to how you can shoot the thing. So if you're taking it out and you're trying to take a shot, you can either, if the light doesn't accommodate a high shutter speed, you can either plan to do a long exposure or think of another way to use the camera using your limited ISO range. As with the Aptus 22, with this camera setup, I find myself shooting less, but keeping a lot more photos with this setup. Now, if you do want one of these cameras and are worried about carrying it, I've traveled with this camera quite a bit, and there are bags that'll fit an entire one of these fairly comfortably, and one of those is the Tenba Skyline 10. Not sponsored or anything, but I do really like the way that this bag fits the camera. It fits with a 55mm 2.8 in there, my charger, my cables, and memory cards, all that stuff. And when I'm on flights, it works as my personal bag. Right, so I realized I can just grab the bag and show you that the camera fits. So here is the Tenba 10 Skyline, and I'm going to open it up and show you. There's the camera right there, neatly fitting on its side. And with that, we have a medium format SLR packed away just like that and out of the bag now. So it's a nice bag. I find it quite comfortable to travel with, and it shows that you don't always need to have these things in an armored case. Although I know there's, you kind of might feel like you want to do it just because the camera is expensive and difficult to get a hold of nowadays. But yeah, I have traveled with this setup in a bag just like that, or then, specifically just that actual bag, and it's worked out pretty well. Shooting with the P45, image quality. So the sensor is big. The pixels aren't the biggest, but they still dwarf that of big megapixel monsters of today's full-frame mirrorless cameras. Now, combine that with the fact that this sensor does not come equipped with an AA filter, means that not only do you get a very nice 39 megapixel image, but the sharpness that comes out of this camera is out of this world. And it punches very, very hard. It's a very nice image and it'll knock your socks off. At the base ISO 50, the files that come out are very, very clean, obviously. And with that 16-bit color depth, the color gradients can be exceptionally fine. All this combines to give you a dynamic range that is overall pretty excellent. Again, in 2005, this was amazing. In 2024, I personally still think it's very good. No, it's not as good as a full frame mirrorless system like the A7R5. Of course not. You know, this digital back, it's from 2005. But it is very usable. And, you know, when you expose the camera correctly, you do get a reasonably good range to pull and push files. This cannot really be understated. Overall, I'm ridiculously impressed with how much malleability comes out of the P45 files. Now, some of you may have noticed, again, this is not a full-frame medium format 645 sensor, but it's not that far off. Now, when you compare it to a 645 in like sensor size, it's about a 1.15 times crop. Overall, it's a pretty small crop, but you know, it does help you get a little bit better corner performance out of the optic, but most of the times these optics are fairly good anyway, so you don't really need that much help improving them. But you know, you get a little bit of extra croppage to get just a little bit better overall sharpness in the frame. Now, with the medium format CCDs, I do feel like it's really hard not to comment on color, and you know, I'm not really great at saying things about color output, but you know, we'll see in the images that the colors are punchy and lovely, and again, very flexible in post, and you know, you can generally get this camera to produce very nice files, and they have, again, enough flexibility that you can sway them in a way that makes you smile. Now, one thing I also want to mention when you're shooting with these cameras related to image quality, specifically to image editing, is with regards to using Capture One. If you do decide to get one of these medium format backs by Leaf or by Phase One, since you know Phase One ended up buying Leaf, you'll likely be able to get a free copy of Capture One brackets for digital backs. So it will only work with files from digital backs, you know, as the name suggests. And it is free as long as you own one of the backs that will supports it. And all you have to do is register the back with Capture One, and you can enjoy nice editing software. Again, not sponsored, but I legitimately enjoyed editing the files that came out of the camera on Capture One, and you know, it kind of shows that they've had a lot of experience doing image editing with these digital back systems. So I think it's worth downloading it and using it if you do get one of these, but that's just me. All right. Before we move on to the photo gallery, I realized that I did not record a section commenting about ISO performance. So I am back in what I wore the day that I shot the video, and I've ruined the continuity by telling you, but let's get into that. So as I said, ISO 50 base ISO is very nice. Everything is fairly noise-free when it's well exposed, and you get lots of malleability in the file. I would say that basically 50 and 100 are its sweet spot. At 200, you will start to see color and luminance noise, and at 400 you will definitely see luminance noise. Yeah, if you're expecting this to kind of be like the GFX where the high ISO is super duper awesome, no. It is very much not like that. The P45 likes to definitely stay, like I said, at 50 to 100, with 200 being fine and 400 being workable if you're not pushing it much. But as soon as you do push the files up from there, if you do like a one-stop push up to effectively ISO 800, you're probably going to see quite a bit more noise come in, and you may see other like CCD artifacts, like some sensors might have like extra like line artifacts, or other like hot pixels are probably more common in this kind of back. I know that in mine it's not too bad, and in software you can generally click like remove hot pixel and it's gonna work. But keep in mind the medium format sensor of old is not like the GFX or Hasselblad sensors of now. They are not high ISO monsters. Yeah. But yeah, let's have a quick look at some examples of the ISO performance and then move on to the photo gallery. Recommendation, in short, yes, I do recommend the P45 if you are looking for a medium format CCD to try. The price for these isn't that low though. A normal P45 seems to be hovering around $1,300 to $1,700 US dollars, depending on the amount. You know, that said, if you go for the contacts one, it's like infinitely more money, so keep that in mind. The plus one and the regular P45, they're actually fairly common in the world of medium format, so looking for them shouldn't be that hard. And as a bonus of these kind of being more available is that you'll find that there are still fairly active users, and that way, if you do have a question about using these or need some help, if you post on community forums, usually you'll be able to get a response fairly quickly, or there are generally enough of these around that if you use the search function, you'll probably find the question that you had in your mind, and generally can get things answered fairly quickly. Now, it also helps that the company that makes the back, Phase One, still exists, and they'll actually, generally be able to assist you with some things. I know for the most part, they don't quite do servicing anymore, I don't think, but there are still some places out there that will work on P45s and P45 pluses. I think those places are rapidly dwindling in number, but they do exist. I, for example, have had my P45 calibrated to repair / address a line error that it had, and it is now good. So, good times. Now, other things about this camera that make it easy to recommend are all the things that it does get right. For example, the responsiveness of the digital back when you're going through the menus, and if you're just looking to check your histograms and stuff, means that the camera itself, when you're using it, it doesn't really feel like a chore. It doesn't feel like it's really arbitrarily slow. You just kind of get to it, do what you have to do on the back, and get back to shooting. The only thing I do have to say, and I got to bring it up again, is that, again, image review is quite bad. So, you can treat it like the back doesn't have image review and either take another shot or, be confident and move on. But it's honestly not the worst thing in the world. It kind of forces you to chimp less in a way. So, pros and cons, although I personally do really like being able to focus check. But, it is what it is with this particular digital back. Now, again, I find that these things are generally very good, especially if you're trying to pivot away from film. As I said before in my other videos, while the resurgence of film is pretty awesome, and it's definitely helped with keeping 35mm film alive, in my area, developing medium format is much slower and much more expensive. And while this digital back isn't cheap, if you are planning to shoot lots of medium, it could be a value option in the long run. On top of that, the P45 resolution is impressive. I know 39 doesn't sound that huge nowadays, but it is quite good still, again, given the very high apparent sharpness that comes out of these files. And, buying this back, I don't really regret not going to 120 film anymore. That being said, I do get that if you're shooting film for the joy of shooting film, that's a totally different thing. This digital back review probably isn't going to change your mind anyways. But if you want to try a digital sensor, I am very happy with the P45. I think even happier than I am with the Aptus 22, since I generally do less weighting with the P45. Believe it or not, the P45 digital back, the 645 DF Plus, and the 55mm f2.8 lens that I currently have on this camera are my favorite camera combo to date. Yes, even more favored than my GFX 50S. And I'm probably going to keep shooting this thing until I get either a P65 Plus or one of the other full frame IQ backs. But until then, the P45 images still hold up really well and they punch real hard. But, you know, all in all, that's my opinion on this P45 digital back. What do you think about the P45? And I want to know, did anyone else think of these digital backs and the systems in general as aspirational cameras in the past? Or was that just me? Am I the weird one? Do you happen to want a P45, or do you have one already? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Till next time, bye.